I don't like maps. I love them. And as much as I like the shipping forecast map, I think it could be better. So in this video, I'm going to improve it, at least the names of the regions on the map. I'll leave it to an actual seafarer to decide if the regions themselves need to be changed in any way. Before we start, what is the shipping forecast map? Skip to the time displayed on the screen right now if you already know this. The shipping forecast is a weather forecast for the waters around the Atlantic archipelago. It's broadcast on the BBC radio 2 to 3 times per day, and has been for exactly 100 years and 9 days at the time of writing. I could go into more detail, but I'll control myself. Here's the current map. As you can see, the forecast is split into 31 distinct regions, which is supposed to make it easier for listeners to pinpoint the general area of weather conditions. Some of these regions are named in a really sensible way, others aren't. I'm going to go through each region explaining what they're named after, and if need be, I'm going to change them to something better. Viking. Named for an underwater sandbank in the area. Quick note on how the regions of the map are named. It's usually a geographical feature within or adjacent to that area. This could be an island, an estuary, a bay, a port. Sometimes, as in the case of Viking, there isn't much in the way of major geographic features to choose from, so you're left with something like a sandbank, or a tiny bird-stained rock. North Utsira and South Utsira. These two regions are named after the island of Utsira off the Norwegian coast. This is stupid. A, why are we giving two regions a similar name? Strikes me as a possible vector of confusion. 2, why name either of these areas after such a minor island when there are bigger alternatives? Let's change North Utsira to Sotra, and South Utsira to Ombo. Both are now named after much bigger and easier to pronounce islands. No more of this sharing a geographical feature nonsense. Forties. This one is named after a long section of the North Sea that stretches from Scotland to Norway, and is 40 fathoms deep, hence the name. Cromarty. Named after the Cromarty Firth, an estuary on this part of the Scottish coast. Forth. Named after the ridiculous sounding Firth of Forth, another estuary in Scotland. Tyne. Yet another estuary name, this time in England. Dogger. Named after Dogger Bank in the North Sea. I find this one very funny. Fisher. Named after yet another boring sandbank that doesn't even break sea level. In the case of Forties and Dogger, naming after a sandbank is fine because there's absolutely nothing else in those areas. Fisher, however, butts up against this massive ass island in Denmark, North Jutlandic Island, so I'm going to name this region after that, North Jutland. German Bight, after this bit of water off the coast of Germany, Denmark and the Netherlands. Humber, Thames, yet more estuaries. Getting a bit sick of the estuaries now. Dover. Here we have a problem. This one's named after the port of Dover, and I do not like that. Some of the regions in the shipping forecast are named after ports, and personally I find this really inconsistent. That's because there can never be a system in which every region is named after a port, because several regions aren't adjacent to any land. Meaning right from the off, using ports will always be less of a neat system than geographical features. Any regions that do border land will always have geographical features to pick from. There's just no need to muddy the water by picking ports for some names and natural formations for others. Having said all this, we can keep the name Dover. I'd just say it's named after the Strait of Dover rather than the port. Wight. Portland. Regions named after the Isle of Wight and the Isle of Portland. Plymouth. Another region named after a port. There's a perfectly good set of islands right here. Let's call it Scilly instead. Biscay. Named after the Bay of Biscay. Trafalgar. Named after Cape Trafalgar in Spain. I had a suspicion that the actual Cape Trafalgar didn't lie within the region, and after looking at the coordinates I confirmed my hypothesis. The name is completely geographically incorrect. I'm still going to keep it though, primarily because I like the poetry of one of the northernmost and southernmost shipping forecast regions being named using iconic words in English maritime history, one from near the birth of the nation, the other from just before it reached its peak on the world stage. It just works out so neatly, and I don't want to get rid of that for the sake of geographical accuracy in this case. Fitzroy, named after Admiral Robert Fitzroy, who's actually the one who came up with the idea for the shipping forecast and even coined the phrase weather forecast. This region completely breaks the format by being named after a person rather than a place, but I think we owe Robert Fitzroy a lot given he's the reason we have this map in the first place. I think it's only fair we use a spot to honour him. Seoul, named after Seoul Sandbank. Yet another sandbank. Lundy. Lundy, 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 Lundy. Named after this nothingy little island that nobody's heard of. Why would you name a region that has the entire Bristol Channel in it, one of the biggest waterways in the country, after an island that nobody has fucking heard of and isn't relevant to anything? This is probably the worst name on the map. Truly shit. I propose we call this one Severn, after the Severn Estuary, the mouth of the longest river in Britain. Bristol Channel's a bit too long, just Bristol would sound like it was named after the port city, and you know I can't have that. Severn does sound exactly like the number 7, but both 40s and 4th are also numbery, so f*** you, we're going with 7. Fastnet. Named for Fastnet Rock, the most southerly point of the Republic of Ireland. Irish Sea. If you don't know what this one's named after, I really can't help you. Shannon. Named after the Shannon Estuary. Rockall. Named after Rockall Island. It's a big lump of granite sticking out of this very remote part of the Atlantic. There's nothing here but bird but the UK government claims it's part of the UK. The Irish government says it's not. Malin. Hebrides. I'm doing these two regions together because they both have bits of the Hebrides in. The Hebrides being this archipelago off the coast of Scotland. Malin is named after Malin Head, the most northerly point of the Irish mainland. Malin Head can stay as is. Hebrides, however, I'm going to change that to Lewis, after the biggest island in the region. Lewis and Harris. Bailey. Named after Bill Bailey Bank. Yet another sandbank. Fair Isle. Named after, as you can imagine, Fair Isle, the southernmost island of the Shetland Islands, which sits roughly halfway between the main collection of Shetland Islands and the Orkney Islands. Look at all these bigger and better islands we have to choose from. As I've said in various other points in the video, very few people have heard of this place, whereas most people in the UK have heard of Orkney and Shetland. So that's what we're going to call this one. Faroes. Named after the Faroe Islands. Southeast Iceland. Lastly, the most uninspired name of the bunch. I initially looked at this region name with some degree of scorn due to how boring it is, but having actually looked at the area it covers, it was hard to find a good alternative. All the geographical features on the southeast coast of Iceland are either very minor or very difficult to pronounce for English speakers. In the end I decided on Surtsey, after the recently formed volcanic island that lies just to the west of the region. Surtsey is named after Surtur, the god-slaying fire giant from Norse mythology, and for that reason I think it's too cool not to include. Right, that's it. I've fixed the map. Subscribe please. Bye! The area forecast for the next 24 hours. Viking. Sotra. Southerly or southwesterly 4 to 6, occasionally 7. Later perhaps gale 8 in Sotra. Rain at first. Good, occasionally poor. Ombo. Southwesterly 2 to 4, increasing 4 to 6. Fair. Good. Forties. Cromarty. Southwest 4 to 6, occasionally 7 later, perhaps gale 8. Fair. Good. Forth. Southwest 4 to 6. Fair. Good. Tyne. Southwest 3 to 5. Fair. Good. Dogger. North Jutland. German Bight. Humber. Southwest 4 to 6, occasionally 3 at first, except in North Jutland. Fog patches. Moderate or good, occasionally very poor. Thames. South or southwest 3 or 4. Fog patches. Moderate or good, occasionally very poor. Dover. That's the Strait of Dover, not the Port of Dover. White. Portland. Variable 3 or less, becoming southeast 2 to 4. Mainly fair, moderate or good. Scilly. Southeast 2 to 4, increasing 4 or 5. Fair. Good. Biscay. Fitzroy. Easterly or northeasterly 3 to 5, varying southeasterly 4 to 6. Fair. Good. Trafalgar. Northerly or northeasterly 4 to 6, varying southerly or southeasterly 3 to 5, becoming variable 4 or less in West Trafalgar. Fair. Good. Seoul. Southerly or southeasterly 4 to 6, occasionally 7 later in West Seoul. Fair. good. 7. Fastnet, Irish Sea. Southerly 4 to 6, occasionally 3 in East 7 and East Irish Sea. Fair, good. Shannon, South 5 to 7, occasionally gale 8 later. Rain, good, occasionally poor. Rockall, Malin, Lewis, Bailey. Cyclonic at first in Bailey, otherwise south or southwest 6 to gale 8. Occasionally severe gale 9 at first except in Malin. Decreasing 4 to 6 for a time. Rain, moderate or good, occasionally poor. Orkney and Shetland, Faroes. Southwest, veering west, 7 to severe gale 9. Occasionally storm 10 in Faroes. Backing southeast 3 to 5, veering south 5 to 7 later. Rain, good, occasionally poor. And Surtsey, cyclonic 7 to severe gale 9. Occasionally storm 10 at first, becoming southwesterly 3 to 5. Backing southeasterly 6 to gale 8 later. Rain or snow, moderate to very poor.